Is this specific 503A certified by your state board? Yes, check that box. The next thing is getting medications from them. You've checked the legal boxes for getting medications. Then it flips over to clinical judgment. That's a totally different conversation of whether you're giving the right medications to the right people. That same legal analysis, though, is where we get really hung up for research-based, because research-based with the fat label on it that says not for human use is not part of that analysis. That is not one of the places that you can lawfully, as a practitioner, get medications for your patient. Then the next question is, well, how is everyone else doing it?
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Unscripted. My name is Jeff Sakamoto, and today we've got a great guest with us that was actually referred to us by somebody I know and trust, and she couldn't speak more highly of this individual, so I said we got to have her on the show. And her name is Courtney Walker. She is the founder of Court-Approved Aesthetics. Is that?
Yep, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
And previously the founder and kind of a key part of a multi-million-dollar aesthetics company. Just a great background, great story. Wanted to have her on the show because I know a lot of our audience is, women entrepreneurs, kind of going at it from scratch. And I think you can share a lot of great insight as to not only your journey, but helping them kind of navigate that process. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And the person who referred, I just told her this week, I'm going to put her on a billboard one day because she's the best. I mean, that's the way this industry works. So if you do, I say this all the time, if you do good work for good people will do good work for you. And that is word of mouth referrals. It's what keeps the business going.
100%. I mean, so much of today is about how much, ad spend you can have and everything else. But good old fashioned word of mouth, doing the right thing is the way in my mind to build a good business. So
yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't always mean getting it right, but still doing right by your people and being human and taking accountability and responsibility. I think it just, at the end of the day, goes a long way, because we're in just my world on the internet. I think we're in a big trust recession right now. And that's kind of the space too with healthcare providers, especially in, the HRT world and even in the medical aesthetics world. I hear all the time, there's a new med spa in every corner. And so how do you differentiate yourself when you're competing against people who may have a lot to spend on ad spend? And I think at the end of the day, it all shakes out to word of mouth and, the good word of good people for the work that you did.
Absolutely. And, I always say this too. One of the reasons why I'm in the industry that we are is that, the bar is pretty low. Unfortunately, the bar is pretty low. And unfortunately, like you said, anybody can kind of hang up a shingle. And especially when you're in the medical space, talking about things like hormone optimization, things like that, it can be scary if you're not, you don't have the right people doing the right thing. So
yeah, people take a weekend course and they have a license to support it, but they take the weekend course and then they are, taking patient care in their hands. That's scary. And I can say that from my law license allows me to practice any type of law. So I can practice criminal law and divorce and business law. If you want to stay in jail for a long time, I should be your criminal law attorney because I don't know anything about that. And other than the course I took in law school, and if a weekend course in criminal law will not qualify me to be a great criminal law attorney. And I think the same can be true for healthcare providers. And there are a lot of really great people in the industry who are pouring their heart and soul into hormone optimization, especially for females. And I think those in the South, we say, like the cream will rise to the top. And that's what you just need to do, is just keep doing you and keep being great at what you do, and the rest will shake out.
Absolutely. Well, that's actually a great segue into what it is that you do. And I'd love to kind of hear your backstory. I know you and I have spoken, but I would love to hear kind of how you got to where you are on your background. I mean, you come from a pretty good pedigree of education and experience, and then, kind of how you've migrated through the years.
Yeah, it's super interesting, but also very domino if you zoom out and look at the whole picture. So when I graduated from law school, I started at a big law job. That's what every person who goes to law school, you want to be top of your class, get the big law job, make the big law money. That's what they tell you. Well, I did all those things, and it wasn't all it was cut out to be. I worked with some really great people, but I started off in banking and credit union law. So I did a lot of commercial lending, looked at a lot of those types of contracts. And then quickly in my career, I lateraled to a mergers and acquisitions firm, and then spent the biggest part of my career prior to transitioning to the medical world running deals. And you know, I think I shared this with you. At one point, I'm like 28, sitting there doing my second $42 million transaction for the week. I'm like, if you suckers trust me, a 28-year-old, with your business, your baby,
Yeah.
I can run a business like this. Like, if you trust me to handle it at its most vulnerable state when you're selling or when you're merging with someone, then I can be trusted with the day-to-day operations. And what that job in particular did for me is it kind of created this idea that like money is monopoly money. It certainly doesn't feel that way when we're running payroll and running our bills, but there is more money to be made and more money out there, and gave me this moment of like, why not me? I mean, I'm sitting in the boardroom with people who are intelligent, they're far in their career, but there's nothing really extraordinary about them or something that's so far-fetched that it's like they were just born different. Like, no, they were just presented with different opportunities. I spent my time in a lot of boardrooms while I was in that job. So fast forward to 2022, my best friend at the time was starting a mobile medical aesthetics company, and she had some previous experience in the med spa world, just being in a brick and mortar location. So she was starting this and just doing kind of, go to people's houses, do kind of dinner parties, like the Tupperware model of a medical aesthetics. And she came to me, she was starting it with her sister, and said, can you help us with our operating agreement? Well, I'm a corporate attorney. I can do that in my sleep, of course. And I tell everyone, like, it was my best friend's an attorney card that she got to use for the year, like, to get an operating agreement done. Like, while I have you, can you please look and make sure that we're doing everything the way we're supposed to? Because it doesn't seem right. Like, this seems too easy. We were able to get these accounts.
Yeah.
We're able to do this stuff. Like, it seems too easy. And I didn't have any experience in healthcare law, any that really mattered. So I took a healthcare law class in law school. And then my first firm I was at had a med mal extension to it. And I was like an associate on a case or two. So just doing research projects. So nothing really that mattered, that I would even put on my resume at the end of the day. But I was like, sure, I'll look into this for you and do some research, and quickly realized that they weren't doing everything the way they were supposed to do. And I spent the better part of the next month trying to convince them that I was right. I knew I was right, but trying to convince them, because what I was saying was not the answers you could find on Google, and not the answers that you could find in a Facebook group.
Mm-hmm.
This is my like running joke: for $150,000 in student loan debt, you too can be an attorney and know how to look up laws and know how to read laws and piece them together. So we started at that moment a medical aesthetics company that we grew for 3 years with me in the day-to-day operations. It's in 12 states now. We just opened another surgery center. I don't even know how many brick and mortar locations we have at this point, but this year I was able to step away from the day-to-day because the legal side of things we have pretty down. We're doing pretty much a rinse and repeat model. There might be a one-off somewhere, but so that allowed me to transition out of being in the day-to-day and the HR and a lot of the stuff that comes with running a company. And in that transition, I had to make a decision. Do I want to go back to the grind of private practice fully? Or do I want to create something that doesn't exist and something that I wish existed when even myself as an attorney, when I was starting in the medical aesthetics world, like, I wish this would have been at my disposal. It would have saved me a lot of time, effort, and energy. So, and the biggest two complaints that attorneys have, and other than being like dry and cynical, are time. Everything takes so long. But it's because traditional law operates a lot like an emergency room. I'm in the middle of watching The Pit right now, the new show. riveting, but it is, I mean, it is so similar to how law works. You are constantly triaging clients,
Yeah.
and in your process of triaging, someone in the waiting room, a client in the waiting room who thought they were next in line is no longer next in line, and they're pissed because you didn't do the best job of communicating that to them, but you're back here saving lives, you know?
Right. Right.
It lives in this like adrenaline junkie emergency room type setting, and that's great for a lot of people. I found that to be one of the more frustrating parts of practicing law, because the majority of the problems that came across my desk or that I sat across the table from people were 100% preventable with just a little bit of legal guidance on the beginning. And the second component is it's expensive. It is very, very expensive to hire an attorney. But using the emergency room analogy, it's also very expensive to go to the emergency room because you're dealing with emergent care. And what I did not see in the industry is what if we, using the medical world, what if we want to do a preventative care legal model instead of and you'll always have the emergency care. Like you'll always have the emergency room. You'll always have one-on-one client relationships for those emergency situations. But I don't see enough people in the industry doing preventative compliance care on the front end. And so I created a way that we can do that and hopefully combat those two primary issues of time, because the resources are available to you immediately. And I'm available once a week. We hop on a weekly call, and money, because the amount that when we do this kind of preventative care as a group, it's shared amongst everyone. And so you're not paying top dollar attorney rates, but still getting the same type of service that I have for clients that I represent one-on-one. So I split my time. I do about 50-50 of helping this kind of cohort model of business owners really take charge and put their arms around their own compliance and not just put their head in the sand. It's like, let me put my arm around you. We are going to go through this journey to get your business foundationally where it needs to be on all fronts. And then I have like one-on-one client representation that I do when someone gets a board complaint or that they need someone to actually step in and be their attorney and their advocate.
Yeah, that's so good. I think, a lot of us, we're entrepreneurs, right? And we start a company and really we don't think about doing that care, preventative care until it's, till it is an emergency room situation. And, you get a call or something happens and all of a sudden it's like panic time and you got to hire an attorney, right? And so to your point, doing that work up front and kind of along the way prevents a lot of those things from happening, right? And it's so valuable.
Yeah, I just told someone this morning in an onboarding call, and I try to give the tips and tricks that I've learned, not just from my own company, but the companies that I help that were doing those big deals. They were clearly doing something right when cash was exchanging hands multiple times a week for crazy amounts of money. Like something they were doing is right. And so the onboarding call I had this morning, like one of the things that's not really legal related, but it is more of an operator and knowing how the flow of the business. It's like, do you know what your Department of Revenue number is for your business? Do you know what your EIN number is? Do you know what your Secretary of State number is? No, well, don't just go. If I could say, like, you need to have this all in a spreadsheet. Sure. Here's the spreadsheet I use. So I need you to block off a Saturday morning, and you are going to go find all those things, save them in one folder, and put it all in this spreadsheet. And so next week when I'm like, using Socratic method, I'm like, Jeff, did you do your spreadsheet this weekend?
Right.
Because being able to have that stuff on the front end, someone to be like, this number is important. And if you throw this document away, you are going to pull your hair out when you have to deal with the IRS, or you're going to have to pay someone to do it for you. When all you really needed was someone to say, this is important, put this number here, save this here. Don't just toss it and throw it or do whatever, because you get so much mail and stuff. It's just that guidance. It's called the residency, and the whole process. It's a 6-month kind of guided cohort tour where at the end of the process, you will have touched or had the opportunity to touch every single area of your business, down to your business licenses, your consent forms, your employee issues. I just this morning was talking to someone about doing a education reimbursement agreement. So if they send someone off to a training and they want to cover it, then how long should the employee stay before, if they leave next week, you've got to pay me back for this training.
Yeah.
But you have all of the tools to really have a compliant business and a business that's proactive in its legal service within that 6-month period. We'll just walk through it together. And I use the term residency probably because of the pit, but I felt like it was the best medical term for what I hope the experience is like. Like, I am here, I am helping you, I'm supporting you, I'm reassuring you and providing you with the tools. But this is a journey that you're going through. But at the end of it, you are going to be a phenomenal business owner. I mean, you will have, it's like a crash course in business. From the legal side, someone else who has a different business side, maybe their accountant, they would have other things to offer. But at least from the legal and compliance and making compliance part of the day-to-day integrated into your operations, this is my 6-month. It's going to require a lot from you, but at the end of 6 months, I think that you'll have something that you're really proud of.
So, and just so that people understand the process. So essentially what you do is you help somebody it could be at the genesis of their business where they're just starting out, and helping them kind of work through setting up the articles of incorporation and what you need to do here, setting up the OA and operating agreement, and kind of walking through each step of the way so that they have essentially a checklist of all those things that a successful, scalable business has in place. Is that fair summarization?
That is. I have a big percentage that is people just starting out, but then I have people who've been doing it for 6 years.
Yeah. And just didn't do it from the beginning, right from the beginning, and trying to backfill, right?
Yeah. They're like, oh, we don't have an operating agreement.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we need to do that, and we can get one right now. Or we have an operating agreement that had a sunset provision that expired 6 years ago. You're like, oh, so you don't have one, which just makes things really messy. Because what if your partner, what if you all want to split, or what if they want to sell their interest, and now you're doing business with Joe Schmo that you don't even know? It's like, those types of things can really protect you on, even if you don't do them on the front end. I don't have a ton of people who really are thinking about this in the front end.
Exactly.
Because I think it's just a part of our culture that we have an idea and we go follow a business, and you can go do it you can go do your articles online by yourself. And that's such a misconception. I mean, you can go do them by yourself, but that is such a small fragment of what it takes to really get a business up off the ground, and get a business up off the ground that you are protected in the future.
Yeah.
Should something happen. And that's all areas. Like, the board comes in. How does your documentation look? What does your chart review process look like? What does that internally look like? Who is doing it? So I tell people when we started our company, if the board came in, I wanted to have a cheese plate ready for them. Like, come on in. What do you want to see? Because we've got all these things in place.
No, that's beautiful. I mean, like you said, as entrepreneurs, we just kind of start. We're hair on fire. We don't know what we don't know, and that's half the battle. And if that's you and you fall into that category, you shouldn't necessarily feel bad. I mean, I've served on board of advisors. I've advised several companies that are multi-million-dollar companies, and they don't have some of these basics in place. It's not. It doesn't make you a bad person if you haven't done it, but there is a remedy here to fix that, right? So
yeah, and that's a really good point. And I've said this many times. And right now the actual platform, the residency, is 79 parts, 79 modules of topics. Because over the time when we were going into new states, I quickly realized that the answers to the questions might be different, but for the most part, the questions are the same. And so first off, people are just saying, like, what questions do I need to ask? I never thought about that. And so there's 79 module parts with recorded videos that I try to keep around 15 minutes, with tons of documents that I have drafted myself to support them. And then each week we go really deep on a topic with a Q&A portion and troubleshooting and It's kind of like a supported learning process where there's some that you can do on your own, but if you really want to get really deep and have an interactive process, then you come on Wednesday. It's pre-scheduled out and you know which ones you want to come to. But I say that because n nothing I really provide to people, like one individual piece of it, is not that difficult. Like, it's not that difficult to correct. It's not that difficult to do on the front end. It's not that difficult to find someone who can do it for you. What's really difficult is just knowing it all. Like, I don't even know where to start. And
Right.
it's, that saying of like eating an elephant, you have to start with one bite. But what I found is people don't even know like what animal they're eating. Like they don't even know kind of where they're at in the process. And what I think is helpful is just seeing it all laid out. And so and knowing that it has a start and end of 6 months and like, let's hammer through this together. And if you're okay with, an athlete. So if you're okay with like some tough love coaching too, to get you through there, then it's going to be a great fit for you.
Awesome. And now, who is this applicable for? I mean, we've talked about a couple different, examples, but who is kind of a representation of your client base?
So originally, I started off as court-approved aesthetics because that is what I became an expert in pretty quickly is medical aesthetics law. But quickly, my clientele transformed a little bit into more health and wellness. And if I had a Venn diagram, if I could get someone to make me one of what the offerings of my clients are. So do they do Botox and filler? Do they do HRT? Do they have machines? I have some clients who do it all. I have some who just do HRT and GLP-1 peptide type stuff, and they don't touch Botox at all. But so now I would say my kind of niche is private pay healthcare. They might have some insurance base, but the majority of their business is private pay healthcare. And because that kind of the law surrounding that is the same no matter if you're injecting Botox or if you're giving someone a pellet. Now, the clinical differences are huge, but the legalities around it are the same.
Got it. I'm curious, because of your experience in scaling a practice, and seeing that grow, what do you think was kind of the key in helping you do that? I mean, take the legal aspect aside, like where do so many of our watchers and viewers and clients, they're just starting, right? Or they're trying to scale. And obviously you had a successful practice or part of a successful practice. What do you think were the keys to that?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, saying I was part of a successful practice is huge. I mean, we have a phenomenal team of trusted people, and we were able to go as quickly as we possibly could. It's myself and two other founders, and we were able to just run because we all were driven in the same direction. Then we did spend a lot of time catching our tails, even with three people doing things. So that is normal, to your point earlier. But the second one I think is really start being comfortable with starting small. I think what I hear from people, and I see contracts come across my desk all the time, and I usually respond back with, you've already told me in your email that you're not ready for this, because some sales rep has convinced them that this deal will never, ever happen again. And I'm like, yeah, come to me in December when the deal is even better.
Yeah.
But they want, they're like, oh, well, we have this laser and it's going to be able to do X, Y, and Z and take off tattoos. I'm like, do you have any clients with tattoos?
Right.
Well, I don't know, but it could. Like, yeah, so you're going and getting services and then going to try to find the clients when the service or the machine is the easiest piece. You can find 4 different machines tomorrow that would give you a better rate. Like, let them argue with it. The machine does what the machine does, but do you have the clientele to support it? And just being comfortable with really starting small and building up from there. I think people just get really in over their heads. It gives me a ton of heartburn when people start off and they have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt before they have their first client. First, you might not have the clients, and second, you might decide entrepreneurship's not for you.
Yeah.
And you'd rather decide that when you're having to do all of the taxes and you're having to do the marketing because you're a one-person shop, like assuming you don't have a ton of money backing you and you're self-funding it, you might decide 6 months in, like, this is not for me, which is okay. It is not for everyone. But I'd rather you figure that out with very little overhead and liability attached to it than, you know, have $300,000 that you owe people and machines, and now you're selling machines, which you cannot do. There's no market for reselling machines. Um, I think people just don't know that on the front end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And conversely, what do you think have been the biggest challenges in growing and scaling, with that company?
I think the biggest challenge that we don't have a real solution for, even today, I haven't been able to find a real solution for it, is managing inventory and processes across multiple locations when the practice owner isn't present in all locations. And I don't necessarily mean like something as nefarious as an employee stealing something, but it's just keeping, when you've got 10 locations and you look at the books, like, how much product do you need, and how do we make sure that we are keeping you stocked while also being aware of expiration dates and things like that. But the product we use is very expensive. When I'm talking about, my practices use Botox and filler and some really expensive, some really, really expensive material. So you don't really want just stuff sitting on the shelf for weeks, but you don't want to spend an astronomical amount of admin time ordering and delivering and transferring stock and everything. And I don't know that we have a true solution to that.
Yeah.
Even down to using Botox vials or neuromodulator vials, it's 100 units. How do we track that 100 units and make sure that we're keeping accurate records of our inventory? We don't have these huge swings in our financials just to reflect like the shifts in inventory that didn't get appropriately allocated, or someone over diluted or undiluted. There's just a lot of, I think, room for error and human error in the inventory process. And the thing that the industry I think that's most similar to this is the world of like bartending, because how are you, it's easy to say, if you're here and I'm giving you a can of beer, it's like one can, here you go. But when you're in bartending, like, you're pouring, is it a heavy pour, and really monitoring, because the practice owner pays tax on the amount of product purchased, not necessarily the amount of product sold. They're paying, alcohol tax on that. And I know people in the industry that they have to go in and like weigh their bottles every so often just to make sure that they're staying on top of it. And then, because what happens is all of a sudden you are slowly, incrementally, multiple bottles of Tito's is now missing. And it's not really that it's missing. It's just that somebody was a heavy pourer some days, but monitoring that and tracking that, I think, is really challenging for businesses.
Yeah, interesting. Courtney, what I'm really picking up that I think your clients obviously get the opportunity and value from is not only can you help them with compliance and obviously offer them a legal perspective, but you have hands-on experience, and not only hands-on experience in the field they're in, but also you sat in the boardrooms of these multi-million-dollar M&As, right? And so you've seen all aspects of this, and you can shed light. We use our experiences to, impart wisdom upon people. And I see that you're very well-rounded, whereas a lot of, attorneys or what have you that I've worked with in the past, it's very singular in focus. And I think you're able to bring a very comprehensive approach to it. I'm assuming that that's one of your strengths just in talking with you, but it really comes across.
Thank you for saying that. That is something I'm really passionate about. Compliance lives in your operations. I do not think it's helpful. And one of the things that I enjoyed the most about what I do now is people do not pay me by the hour to be a part of my program. So it's not like I have your financial, I'm not thinking about it. I'm going to take as long as it takes and say it however many ways that it needs to be said for it to click and for you to feel confident in the answer. Because running a business is all about strategic risk. If you do not want to, if you want zero risk, you need to shut down your business and you go home. So it's one thing for me just to tell you what the law is, but then what what I find that happens, if we're talking about a nurse practitioner doing a health screening, good faith exam, whatever you want to call it, for a new patient, so an RN can then treat the patient. Well, I can easily tell you an RN, it's not within their scope of practice in all 50 states to do that health screening. So someone, an APRN, PA, MD, DO, needs to do that health screening before the patient is treated. That's the law. But then what happens is like, oh, now what? Okay. So every time beforehand, just telling someone the law does not answer questions. It does not create a model that works and that's efficient and actually works for their business. So the law, I think, is a really small part of what I do, just knowing it, but it's more like, how do we make it work for you? Because we can, just depending on, and I'll say no if the answer is no, but what do you want the outcome to be? What's the law? And how do we bridge the gap between the two of those? And that lives in your operations.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I'm going to segue a little bit into some hot topics. A lot of the, I'm sure a lot of your clients have gotten involved in the GLP-1 craze, and we love them too. I was probably the biggest skeptic on GLP-1s until I actually saw case studies. I actually used it myself to microdose, and just the impact. It's really truly a miracle invention, for lack of a better term. But I'm just curious to kind of hear your thoughts on this. A lot of the boards, state boards, are starting to crack down on it. There's a lot of pressure being applied by big pharma on not only practitioners, but companies and pharmacies, et cetera. What's the best way for folks to kind of navigate this and to stay compliant, do things the right way, but also be able to offer that to their patients?
Yes, I spend a lot of time talking about this topic because it is a hot button issue, and just on a not an attorney standpoint, just on a person standpoint, I do have mixed feelings about it because I do want my children to grow up in a world where we are constantly investing in medicine. And how we incentivize people to invest in medicine is we give them patents and we protect that. So I think that I see how the trajectory of this space could be harmful to that. And long term, but that's a long term harm. So today, I think that the other part is I like you see the benefits of the drug. I mean, constantly the studies are getting pushed to me about its effect on cirrhosis of the liver, its effect on, I just saw one come through with dementia, and specifically talking about GLP-1. So the world of peptide, including GLP-1s, I think is somewhat of the future of medicine, of doing preventative care, really, on utilizing peptides of all sorts. So compliance in the GLP-1 space, specifically related to the compounding versions of it. I think starting off, the thing that I want people to know, and I really stand behind this, is recently one of the big manufacturers sent a letter to the Georgia Board of Nursing. And I use a lot of analogies, if you can't tell already, because I really want it to hit home. And sometimes when we talk in jurisprudence, res judicata, it's like, what? So I try to make it make sense in things that I experience in my everyday life, to draw comparisons and then come back to it. So for the group that I work with, I compared this letter to the Georgia Board of Nursing, like me and my 3 children. So in this letter, you have the Board of Nursing, that's the parent, just like I'm the parent of my 3 children. And you have 3 children underneath that, which is the drug manufacturer, name brand drugs, compounding pharmacies, providers. And what the manufacturer is doing in that letter is exactly what any one of my children do on any given day. They're tattling on the other 2. And they're saying, they're doing something wrong, they're doing something wrong, and they're doing something wrong together. And Board of Nursing, you need to do something about it.
Yep.
The biggest takeaway from that is the same way that my children tattle to me is because they don't have the power. Only I have the power as a parent. And so I've said this from the beginning. You are responsible to your licensing board. If your licensing board does not tell you you are not allowed to do it, then It's so long as you are practicing good medicine and you feel confident in your what you're doing, that you're willing to stand before a board and defend your treatment of a patient. So
Yep.
long as you're operating in that space and your board does not tell you it's not okay, these outside parties are just like my children tattling on each other.
Right.
They have no authority on it. And that's why now the manufacturers are going that route, because the lawsuits haven't scared people, which the lawsuits have not been against practitioners. The lawsuits have been against companies, and for good reasons, that they've also put in lots of facts that make it seem like they have the ability to control the practice, which they don't. The lawsuits are not working. The cease and desist are not working. All of this stuff is not working. The FDA is not shutting down compounding pharmacies, 503A compounding pharmacies. So this is the next step for the manufacturer, is like, let's go to the boards and see if we can get the boards on our side, because then if your board tells you you're not allowed to, of course, then you're not allowed to, because it's not within your scope of your license anymore, and not to be compliant with your license. So if your state board has not said anything on the issue, then I think that your job as a practitioner is to exercise clinical judgment, prescribe the treatment, and give your patient the treatment that you feel confident in. And what I tell people that I work with on a one-on-one basis is I will defend that all day, every day until the cows come home, because I also have a license and I'm also instructed, I took an oath to the Constitution that I would defend my clients to the best of my ability. And my clients have a constitutional right to an attorney. It's one of the only professions that is guaranteed by the Constitution. And I take that so seriously when I'm representing my clients. I want to represent them to the best of my ability. I will never allow some manufacturer to come in and tell me how I can represent my clients.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't go to law school. You didn't take that oath. You don't know what you're talking about. This is my job, and it's within the scope of my license to do whatever is best for me. The same is true for medical professionals. But the biggest deal now is, the reason it's such a stink is not that it hasn't happened before. It's not that it's not currently happening in other areas. Like, you can go get a compounded version of Kybella, which is an AbbVie product, and is currently under a patent. But Allergan is not coming after people because it doesn't have the money tied to it.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
so then when you're trying to treat your patient and you realize this is all about money, like, I have dissenter tattooed on my wrist. This is me being a dissenter, where it's like we're going to double down. Like, if you want to treat your patients with this within the scope of your license and your board says it's okay, we're going to treat your patients with that. So, as a practitioner though, the next step would be making sure you CYA at every step, because it has all this stink around it. So, I just got a question from someone. I do these segments called Miscreant Mondays, where I discuss maybe some, in the conversation we talked about earlier, where risk versus the law, and like, how do you manage those two things? So where are you at on the spectrum? Like, where I'm like, you're going to lose your license, or is it like, a good example of that would be, I didn't have my business credit card on me when I went to the grocery store to get something for an open house, so I used my personal credit card. Well, you're not going to pierce the corporate veil over one transaction. That's a one. So I got a question on this Miscreant Monday that was about, GLP-1 medications, and about, can you just blanket change all of your medications for your patients because you need to go to a new compounding pharmacy, or you need to switch them to a microdose or whatever. And my response to that was, could you change a patient's medications without informing them and getting their consent in any other area of medicine? If the answer is no, then the answer is no here. Which means you have to go back to the patients and say, we had this new medication, we're going to try the new dose, like, let's titrate you down. You have to get the patient's consent. And that's where I think practices are going to get in big trouble, is because they are, in light of all this GLP-1 mess, they're making like bad clinical decisions, not on the actual medicine they're prescribing or the actual treatment, but how they're handling the waves, like how they're riding their waves. They're making mistakes in that process.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fairness to them, it's wild. It's wild
Oh, I
how,
know.
how
Yeah.
fast it's changing, right? And different medications and formulations and what have you. So I can understand why it happens, but to your point, that's not good enough, right? We got to again raise that bar.
Yeah, because I think if someone comes to you and you say, I prescribed this medication because I believe it was best, then it lives in your documentation, it lives in your chart. Did you
Yeah.
get the patient's consent to that? Why did they go from this milligram to this milligram? There's no meeting in between there. There was no titration schedule. Did you get their consent? Because that's the worst thing that can happen. And what can raise a lot of red flags is I get medication shipped to my door and without running it by me at all, telling me the risk associated, getting my consent, a new medication comes to my door that's compounded with something different. I didn't consent to that.
Mm.
And in any other world, I think people would be like, yeah, of course, you have to get the patient's consent to do that. But for some reason, because I think it's just all the noise, all of the lawsuits and everything. For some reason, the GLP-1 has got everyone's mind kind of scrambled in, and that's what I spend a lot of time doing is like, we are talking about the practice that you do every day and you will continue to do every day. Follow the practice that you do. And that's what the answer is always, what would you do if this was any other medication? And you needed to change because of a shortage issue.
Yeah.
I take ADHD medicine and it often goes on shortage. If my provider needs to get me a different medication, how would you handle that? You would have a conversation with the patient. You would explain the differences in the medication. You would explain why they need to switch because of the shortage or because of whatever. Here are the risks associated. Do you have any questions? No, I consent. Send it to the pharmacy. That same process has to be followed here in the GLP-1 space.
No, I think that's really well said. And you mentioned some of the state boards that are, kind of, we'll call it cracking down, for lack of a better term. What are those states that have been particularly vocal in kind of reining things in on the GLP-1 space?
Yeah, so there's a laundry list. I don't want to misquote, but there's a couple in the Northeast. Washington is one. Alabama is one, which I find is really interesting because that does not seem that seems very not Alabama of them to want to regulate in that way. It's yet to be determined on what Georgia will say. I would say that Georgia will allow practitioners to continue but to be determined. We'll see. But that's actually one of my segments I'm doing next is to kind of I have a lot of educational material I put out of just like the State of the Union on where we're at on boards rulings for GLP-1s.
Got it. Yeah, cool. How deep have you gone down the peptide rabbit hole? As far as, I mean, I'm sure it's popular with your practitioners and clinicians. We have the demand for it on our end, where everybody's, hey, how do I get my hand on peptides? Is it, do you have pharmacy, from a 503A pharmacy? Do I need to go research all of those things? And so, how involved have you got in that space?
Pretty involved recently, in helping people navigate both 503A and if they want to go the research route, and I say people, the research route I do not do with practitioners, but if they want to go the research route, how you can, if you believe that's what is needed for a patient, how you can go that route and mitigate some of your risk. Again, it's risk. Everything we do is risk. So how can we mitigate that at the end of the day? So 503A peptides are just like any other medication, which was also why I've said the legality is the same. There's a lot of clinical differences, but the legal analysis is where are you, based on the FDA, allowed to get medications from? 503A, 503B, 503As are regulated by your state board of pharmacy. So now we're at 503A, so we've checked that legal box. Then we go to your state board of pharmacy. Is this specific 503A certified by your state board? Yes, check that box. Then the next thing is getting medications from them. So you've checked the legal boxes for getting medications. Then it flips over to clinical judgment, which is not that's a totally different conversation of whether you're giving the right medications to the right people. That same legal analysis, though, is where we get really hung up for research-based, because research-based with a fat label on it that says not for human use is not part of that analysis. That is not one of the places that you can lawfully, as a practitioner, get medications for your patients. Then the next question is, well, how is everyone else doing it? So this is something I even have to navigate. I mean, even being on this podcast, something that I really have to take into consideration when I speak is, if I was just a business owner, I would not have to have the same level of awareness of risk that I do because I'm an attorney.
Yes.
The law license gives me a leg up. It gives me some authority. It gives me some trust. People make a lot of assumptions, but with that comes responsibility. And, when it comes to the responsibility of a lot of disclaimers of, I don't know every circumstance in your business. I don't know what state you're operating in. And that frustrates a lot of people because attorneys speak a lot in, well, maybe, and what ifs and whatever. And it's because when we tell someone advice, when we give someone true advice, they're taking it, they're trusting it, they're running with it. And so the same can be said for medical providers. When you're prescribing or giving someone a medication, if you are treating it as not like, if you're treating it with a little bit more care than you would say, oh yeah, you should go take a fish oil supplement. And then you rely on the person to go to the pharmacy and pick up in the supplement aisle a fish oil supplement. That risk, I think, is really low for medical providers because they're just recommending supplements.
Sure.
But when you are actually ordering them, drawing them up, giving them, I've heard the argument that that's not a medication. Looks like a duck, quacks like a duck.
I've heard it. Yeah, we've got a lot of research groups pitching us as to distribute that, and it's they get their legal counsel on and share their opinions, and I've heard it.
Yeah. So then I have a conversation with a lot of health coaches, and I make the same comparison that I make with the business owner versus the attorney. A health coach, no one is assuming that you took the intense courses in biology and went through residency and did all the things it takes to become an MD. They're assuming that you know some things about medicine and some things about the body, but your license does not come with the same level of responsibility, and you don't have a board to respond to in the same way that a medical provider does. I think the biggest risk for a health coach is teetering on practicing medicine, where you get really into it. So much of this is like not a hard and fast rule. Where do you teeter into? I take a microdose of GLP-1 medication and I love it, and I think everyone could benefit from it. That's a opinion-based statement. But when you start putting in like research and really backing up your statement, which a health coach would do, you need to be really careful in that you are not essentially practicing medicine without a license and without coverage, of course. So the people that I help in the health coach space, we really work on, to your point earlier, it's like work on the operations component of it. So what is your pitch? How are you communicating with your patients? And if at the end of the day, you are treating this like a supplement, like they should take some creatine, or they should do, like, if you're treating it like a supplement, your risk becomes exponentially lower. But if you are mixing these medications that you're getting from research grade and they're coming in your office and you're jabbing them,
It's happening. It's
happening, but I don't take on every client, but I'm pretty upfront where I'm like, yeah, I would take you on. I would defend you in that. Like, that doesn't mean I'm going to, but I would. And then I'm like, no, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. I'm not defending you in that. Like,
yeah, no, I think that's really well said.
But my point, Jeff, is the end result that you want, if you really care about patients and you really believe that they deserve this type of treatment, you can still get them there in a way that's compliant. It might not be the way that you absolutely want them to get there, But if you really are patient centered and you believe that they need NAD and you can't get it from a compounding pharmacy, but you believe it, you can still get your patient that medication. It just, as a health coach, it's just not going to look like a carbon copy of a doctor's office. Like, it can't. You're not a medical doctor. But you can still have a good supplement source that they are ordering it for themselves online, and you can get, tell them, like, in my experience and based on my licensure, I think people do need these sources or these peptides. I find these to be really reputable, and then push them in the direction of that. So if you're really focused on the patient and getting them the good care, we absolutely can get you there. But if you're really focused on, no, I want it to happen in this way, which usually has money behind it, then we probably are going to say no.
Yeah. No. Well said.
Me. I'm probably going to say no.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well, I know one area that you are very proficient at is the use of AI and incorporating that into your practice. And, I mean, it's life-changing. ChatGPT is, making our business so much easier in every way. And I'm sure it's, from what I understand, you're able to help a lot of your clients kind of navigate and use tools in AI and show them how to use those effectively. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I do the normal standard training for clients on using AI in their business. And I just had this conversation last night with someone where I got on the internet a few months ago and pretty much begged every person that I know to implement this in their business. When I say a few months ago, like 8 months ago, I'm like, this is essentially what the beginning stages of cryptocurrency were to us. And I'm telling you now, you've always wondered, if only I know. I'm telling you, use it in your business, because what's going to happen is businesses are going to use it. They are going to reap the crazy benefits, and then it's going to regulate. And then you're going to be expected to use it because you can't keep up. So you will use it. But what happens is you didn't reap that crazy benefit at the beginning. And I'm already seeing it happening with people putting reels of, we can tell this is ChatGPT because it uses an M dash, which is highly offensive because as attorneys, we love a good M dash. But it's like people are doing call out videos of people using ChatGPT for the same captions that they gained a huge following on 4 months ago.
Right.
And so it's like, oh, now the wave is already here where we're being forced to use it. And now we're being forced to use it in a way that we can't even be recognized, using it even better. So I use ChatGPT every single day, multiple times a day. But the most interesting thing that I do, in addition to, like, there's plenty of people out there who do marketing and caption help and all of that jazz, but I build attorney trained AI bots. So what that means is, and it was actually one of my introductions into, maybe I could create a community of healthcare providers where I provide support. So I have a mentor who is in Australia, and she creates custom bots for the custom GPTs for the marketing world. So I've used them for about a year, love it. And I'm sitting at the table and I'm like, what could I do? What could I make my life easier by doing one of these? So my prior experience at mergers and acquisitions world was I did a lot of commercial real estate, and growing as quickly as our company did, I looked at a lot of leases. And like, what if I could just brain dump everything I know about a commercial lease, everything I look for? Because I still use ChatGPT very much like an assistant. I give it all the instructions and do a lot of prompting. So what if I could just pre-prompt this GPT? So when I drop a lease in it, essentially what I would do on the front end on a normal chat thread, it's already preloaded with that stuff.
Yep.
Like I want this in a table format. I want these things highlighted. I want high, medium, and low risk on these things. Give me alternative language. Here's a few examples of what I've used in the past. And my husband said I look like a mad scientist because I was up until 12:30 at night, my hair wild, and I'm like, come here, look at it. It's crazy. And still, it is mind-blowing to me. Her name is Lisa. I name all my bots after influential women in history. So her name is Lisa, and she reviews commercial leases. And that is truly my intro into I think we could do something with this and make people's lives a lot easier and save them legal fees either by having someone review it on the front end because they want to be proactive or having someone fight it on the back end. So what I tell people is, and I make these accessible. They're accessible for life for so long as we have ChatGPT to everyone who works for me. And I build out one a month. But so Lisa, a good example, just to tell you what she does, someone can drop their lease in and she will pull out all of the relevant information, just like what I would prompt her to pull out. And then the business owner has to make a decision based on that of what is your risk for this lease. If it is a year-long lease that you can break at any time, and so your total risk exposure is like $1,000, look at the summary that Lisa did. Is it worth $1,000 for you to go have an attorney review it based on the summary and based on the risk exposure?
Right.
The answer is probably not, because an attorney would be more than that, but when it's all said and done. Now, if you put it through Lisa and you see the summary and it's a 10-year lease with a personal guarantee and you're like, 200 grand, 300 grand risk exposure, is that worth it to go take even if you go take it to an attorney and say, I looked at this summary and I have questions. I don't need you to review the whole thing, but I have questions about these 3 segments, or you at least come into it with a bit more knowledge so you can help steer the ship in the right direction. But in that case, it probably is worth it for an attorney to look at it because your risk is if this goes sideways, your risk is so large with the 10-year lease. But for the 1 year, probably not. You would probably be okay, like using Lisa, prompting it, asking for some renegotiation language based on that, and then handling it yourself as a business. And I think that's something that maybe, I don't know, I haven't asked the opinion of a bunch of attorneys, but I think that if I polled a bunch of attorneys, they'd be like, why are you doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because at the end of the day, we don't really, to be fully honest, like, we don't need that work either. It's not building the company. It's not building a book of business. It's a one-off assignment that has pretty low value in the grand scheme of things and really just disrupts the day more than anything. And I have this all the time with friends who want me to look over something. I'm like, I'd rather just do this for you for free because as a friend, because what I would have to charge you is such a small amount anyway. It's just like, you owe me one, like buy me a nice bottle.
But even in the example you gave of the 10-year lease, like being able to kind of craft and kind of get up to speed on a conversation about, carve outs or recourse or certain aspects of things, it makes it easier for everybody, right? Including the attorney. So I resonate a lot with that. That's
yeah,
huge.
It'll get you, usually it's around like a 2-page, but I am very meticulous. And so I was in the instruction, it was like, I want this thing to be in a table. I want it to be easy to read. I don't want 2 pages of just, this is supposed to be like the Cliff Notes version, high risk, high level of what's going on here. And some people have said, well, any ChatGPT can just do that. I'll just say, like, review this lease for me. Act like you're the world's best attorney and review this lease.
Right.
But you're still relying on ChatGPT to decide what is the world's best attorney. And I'm not claiming that it would go with my GPT, but I am telling you that I was at 28 years old, led a big part of the practice where this is what we did. And for huge, huge companies. And I was very fortunate to learn from really great attorneys and to learn from the mistakes of really great businesses.
Yeah.
And that's what's on the back end of that you won't get just in normal ChatGPT. It's all of that, the knowledge of here's where things go sideways. Here's where businesses can really mess up their personal finances too. When we're talking about a lease with a guarantee agreement, like you can really mess yourself up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll have to compare notes with you about your Aussie contact on the bot builder, because that could certainly help our business as well. So.
Oh yeah, she's amazing.
That's great. Well, I would love to tell our audience how they can find you. kind of what your structure looks like. And I'm sure as a result of this conversation, there's a lot of folks that are going to be very interested in what you have to offer. So maybe you can share how to find you.
Yeah. The best way is I'm pretty active on Instagram is the platform I use the most. It is at It's Court Approved. And I do a lot of educational segments on there and do a lot of what we talked about today, just really breaking things down to just at the end of the day, I want anybody who comes in contact with me and works with me to leave more informed than 90% of the people that they'll be in the room with when it comes to other providers. That they at least will not be intimidated by the big terms like, let's break down med mal. What is it actually at the end of the day? And then maybe you'll be less stressed about it because you'll understand how hard it is to have a med mal case. So I do a lot of educational stuff, obviously for free on Instagram. And then my website is courtapprovedaesthetics.com. And that's where you can find out how, if you want to become part of the residency or if you want to work with me, it's all in there.
Awesome. And we'll put the links in there below. But yeah, I can tell you, we have mutual clients and they've been extremely pleased and impressed with your work. So, that comes on good authority. So, Courtney, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to another conversation soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jeff.